Okay, in this video, we're going to look at how to recreate the Gmail icon, or at least get pretty close, using Adobe X. So I'm going to create a new artboard, and I'm just going to choose this one down here for the web because it really doesn't matter how big it is. I'm going to show my grid, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to show square grid. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, I'm going to make my grid size, or my square size, 10 pixels. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Not quite that much. There we go, that should work. Now what I want to do is I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm just going to draw one out, and then I'll manually set the size to 400 by 300. I'm going to I'll align it to the grid, and then I'll take the corners, I'm going to drag them in about 20 pixels. I'll duplicate this rectangle, and I'm going to move the duplicate out of the way. For this one, I'm going to fill it with pure red, and then I'm going to remove the border completely. Now what I want to do is I want to create another rectangle. This one's going to be 320 by 320. Now it actually doesn't matter how high it is as long as it's higher than the rectangle itself. What really matters is that it's 320 pixels wide, so I can get it centered on top of this other rectangle so that there's 40 pixels on the other side. Now I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to hit the subtract button. And now you see what this does is this leaves us with the outer part of the M. So that's what I'll call this, outer M. Alright, I'll move this out of the way because I'm not going to need it. Now I'm going to duplicate this again. Again, move a duplicate out of the way. I'll fill this again with red, and I'll remove the border. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another square. I'm going to make a really big square. And then I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees. And with this square, what I'm going to do is make sure that it's centered on top of the grid here, on top of this rectangle here. I'm going to make sure that it's about 70 pixels from the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it needs to be about 7 more, or 10 more to make it 7. Okay, now what I'll do is I'm going to copy this square because I'm going to need it again here in a minute. Move the copy over to the side. In the meantime, I'm going to select these two, and this time I'm going to hit intersect. Now I'm going to take this copied square, I'm going to put it back on top of this intersection shape here, and I'm going to make this one about 60 pixels from the top. So let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll move it up another 6 or another 10 to make it 60. Now this time I want to select both of them and subtract. And now we have the inner M. So I'm going to move this rectangle down here to the bottom so we can line all these guys up. And what you're going to notice is that we have a problem. What I actually need to do is I actually need to move this part, this inner M, up by about 10 pixels. A little more. There we go. Now, of course, the problem is it's too big. So what I'll do is I'll move the outer M over here. Going to take the rectangle, I'm going to put it on top of the inner M. Then I'll select both of them, and I'll hit intersect. Now, actually, before I did that, I should have made a copy again of my rectangle. Now we'll select them both again, intersect. There we go. Now I'll change my intersection back to inner M. I'll move the rectangle down to the bottom, and you'll see that everything lines up nicely. Okay, now there's also some background and some shading here that I want to add. And so what I'll do is I'll take this square, this rectangle in the background, I'm going to cut it in half. So I'll just make it 200 pixels wide. Move some things over here to get some space. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to make these corners on the right side pointy again. I'll fill this with the color, see what that was that I had here, E6, F3, FF. Now I'll remove the border. I'll copy this, paste it, duplicate it, in other words, and then I'll take that duplicate and I'll rotate it 180 degrees, and then I'll move it over to the side. Now I'll select this right half here, and I'll change the fill on it to E5, F1, FC. Now you're not going to see that much of a difference. In fact, I can barely tell a difference here. I don't know how it's going to come through on the video, but they'll actually become more prominent here in a minute. So I'm going to make sure that both of these rectangles are below the pieces of the M, and then I'll move them into place. Now, if you look at or some variants of the Gmail logo, you'll see that this right half is kind of darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the background for it. I'm going to duplicate it. It'll paste it on top, but that's fine. I'm going to set the fill to pure black, and then I'll set the opacity to 10%. Remove the grid, and there is the Gmail icon recreated in Adobe XD.